Chapter 437. Actually, in the 20 years since the construction of gear, students and society members of different batches had come and gone like a horse lantern. Most of the time, gear was not short on money. Interior renovation was a common thing. The interior decorations before Luo Nan took over were already beyond recognition from the very beginning. The interior renovation project of gear was about to begin during this time. Luo Nan held many renovation blueprints in his hands, but he was unable to grasp them. He felt that the designer's tricks did not match with his mother's great works. But now he saw the layout of the reception room and he was inexplicably pleased. Of course, this was not to say that moving this room to gear was pleasing to the eye. It was just that this was how it should feel at this time and place. The interior layout would not make people forget that this was an abandoned shopping mall located in the dangerous recycling stratum. But sitting here and casually touching it was a relaxing atmosphere that made people cherish it even more. Especially when he heard Nurse Wang say that most of the furniture and decorations here were personally arranged and built by Dean Wan and the children. Luo Nan felt even more admiration. Even if such a person was involved in a secret order, it would be hard for people to feel ill will towards him. But looking at it from another angle, it seemed that Worker Zhai still had a rather difficult path to walk in order to make Di Weiwu truly believe in his godfather. Afraid of delaying the children's rest, Luo Nan and Worker Zhai did not stay for long. They walked one round around the orphanage before saying their goodbyes and leaving. As before, they took the 24-hour low-altitude public bus and embarked on their return journey. Worker Zhai finally had some free time on the bus. He talked to Luo Nan about proper business, the dynamo core that he was researching. Right now, the dynamic structure mode has been basically determined. The simulation results are pretty good. But the bottleneck lies in the materials. I want to find you to confirm it. If possible, I suggest we use the method of dismantling and mending. Dismantling. East wall to repair west wall? Yes. If this dynamo core is only used for the Tai Chi ball, there is actually a large amount of redundancy in its functionality. We can use this point to cut off other unimportant branches to mend the gap. Luo Nan said, "You'll have to ask Shui Lei about this. Or you can just ask the gym master to make a decision." Sure. Tell me when you get back. I can do a few more simulations. Speaking of Xiao Xinyu, Luo Nan remembered the Battle of Winter Solstice. He immediately called Shui Lei to ask about the situation. Shui Lei picked up the call quickly, but he also hung up quickly. His progress was terrible. The only thing that could be confirmed was that Dojo Master Xiao had received Duan Hong's letter of challenge a long time ago. However, he had kept his mouth shut, clearly not intending to tell anyone. This was troublesome. Luo Nan got off the low-altitude bus after it entered the River Wu district. He needed to transfer to another bus, while Worker Zhai could take the bus all the way back to Xiqing district. The air near the recycling stratum was a bit stuffy. Luo Nan checked the map of Xia City with his wristband. Emoya had already taken over his place and occupied his house in Blue Bay community. Now he was homeless. Choosing a hotel to stay in had become a top priority. Luo Nan stood on the side of the road for less than half a minute. His fingers swiped a few times on the virtual screen and a private car stopped beside him. The door opened and the driver called out, "Mr. Luo. Brother Qin, sorry to trouble you." The one who drove over was naturally driver Qin, who was in charge of Luo Nan's security work. Luo Nan grew more and more familiar with him during this time. Luo Nan learned that his real name was Qin Yikuan. The two of them got along quite well and often discussed martial arts issues. The security team by Luo Nan's side was already on the road. Normally, when Luo Nan was traveling with other people, he would only follow in the shadows. He would only appear when he was traveling alone. A month's time was considered peaceful, and both sides were quite satisfied. Luo Nan sat in the car and let out a breath. He introduced his schedule for tonight. "I'm not going home today. I'm going to find a hotel to stay in." Qin Yikuan didn't say much. He just asked, "Where are we going?" Luo Nan apologized first. "I've caused trouble for you guys. It's really hard to find an employer like Mr. Luo who travels between 2 and 3 places." Luo Nan laughed. He already had a plan in mind. "Then let's go to Ocean Sky Cloud City. It'll be convenient for everyone." Qin Yikuan thought for a bit and quickly understood. He smiled and started the car. After driving for a while, Luo Nan suddenly spoke. "Brother Qin, have you heard any news about the Winter Solstice battle in Liuhe Gym? The one from the Thunder Falcon Dojo? You know about it?" "I mainly know about Duan Hong." "Oh, Duan Hong is the master of the Thunder Falcon Dojo. When I was studying at Liuhe Gym, he was already quite famous in Xia City. He once visited Mr. Giant Arm and asked for a spar. Luonan was shocked. He asked in a hurry, "You won? You lost?" "A crushing defeat." Hee. That's not unexpected. Yeah. He was far weaker than Mr. Giant Arm at the time. However, there aren't many people in Xia City who can make Mr. Giant Arm agree to fight. That's true. What happened to him later? I'm not too sure about that. It's just that the concept of the winter solstice battle has suddenly been hyped up in the industry. Only then did I know that he lost a bet 10 years ago. He went far away to train. Now that he's accomplished something, he's come back to get back at us. Luonan let out an "oh," and didn't say anything more. The journey was smooth. They arrived at Ocean Sky Cloud City in about 20 minutes. The atmosphere in the large living area was a bit worse than it was a dozen days ago. The collapse of Aurora Cloud City's parking lot had scared quite a few people. Right now, the construction team was still working on the repairs. The security team had already helped Luonan check in on the way here. Luonan and Xianxia went straight upstairs after getting off the car. Xianxia specifically chose a high-altitude bedroom on the 150th floor. Ocean Sky Cloud City's most famous viewing platform was a few floors down. That's right. Luonan chose Ocean Sky Cloud City not just because this place was only a few steps away from Acumen College. It would save him quite a bit of trouble when he went to school tomorrow morning. More importantly, there was a flying devil ray that he could use here. Luonan and Xianxia just came out of the elevator when they saw the water within the central crystal pillar stir. The enormous body of the devil ray was like a bomber flying through the water. It swept past the crystal wall closest to the elevator and greeted Luonan. So this is an infrasonic wave generator. Xianxia was a bit moved. With the flying devil ray as a tool, Luonan's combat strength could already be evaluated as AB+ rank. Moreover, the sky was his main battlefield. He could come and go as he pleased. So from Luonan's perspective, this place was probably the safest place in Xia City aside from President Ouyang's laboratory. Xianxia obviously understood Luonan's intentions. He was very grateful for this. In a public place like a hotel, any security team would have a relatively thorough contingency plan. It saved him a lot of effort. "I'll be next door. Mr. Luo, just call me if you need anything." "There shouldn't be anything. I'll go take a stroll on the viewing platform in a bit." "I'll go with you." Xianxia didn't forget that this 16-year-old youth's battle had taken place there. Even if Luonan didn't believe that headquarters would send people over to make a move, he still had to prevent certain people from losing their minds and going crazy, right? Luonan didn't mind. He entered the room and gave a rough glance before coming out and heading to the viewing platform. There were people coming down from the upper floor when he entered the elevator. There were 7 or 8 of them and the elevator was half full. They seemed to be quite familiar with each other. They were all talking. They should be attending a gathering or something at the same time. The gathering was over right now. Chapter 438. Luonan's ears perked up when he heard a rather familiar word. The speaker's voice was actually quite soft. It wasn't very obvious in the exchange of greetings between the group of people, but it couldn't be hidden from ability users like Luonan and Xianxia. Xianxia had done his homework quite well. He noticed Luonan's expression, so he shot a glance in that direction and raised his spirits. As for Luonan, he didn't need to turn his head at all within this narrow space. He could distinguish everyone's faces purely by relying on his mental senses. Then he noticed a familiar face. What a coincidence. The person who spoke in front continued, "With this skill, we must continue to work hard and make a name for ourselves as soon as possible. In this day and age, the most undesirable thing is to be pretentious. If we have the ability, we must show it to others. Let's not go back first. Let's go to the viewing platform to get some fresh air and have a deep chat." At this time, the elevator went down to the 142nd floor, where the viewing platform was. The elevator door opened and Luonan and Xianxia glanced at each other. Xianxia extended his hand to indicate for Luonan to go first. Luonan nodded and went out first, but he felt that Xianxia's reaction was a bit off. He paid attention to the target, but that was all. His level of vigilance did not keep up. Luonan ignored what was behind him after walking out of the elevator. He walked straight in the direction of the viewing binoculars. His behavior was quite natural, but at the same time he privately contacted Xianxia through the Hexier, ability user. What? Which one? The one who didn't speak. If it weren't for Xianxia's well-trained training, he would have turned around and left. At this moment, 2 more people came out of the elevator and turned in the direction of the heavenly ocean lake. They were the 2 people who wanted to have a deep chat. Xianxia listened carefully to the man's footsteps. At the same time he tried his best to sense, but he did not discover anything new. I can't sense anything at all. Yes, he hid it very well. If Luonan hadn't been able to see the scene of this person preaching from afar through his mental senses, he would have inadvertently missed this person. The most amazing thing was that the other party didn't seem to be deliberately concealing it. Instead, in the most natural state, it restrained all the abnormal aura and maintained the most harmonious state with the surrounding environment, just like his work. At this time, the conversation on the other side was going on. The person who spoke earlier seemed to be very impatient. As soon as he stood still, he said in an especially excited tone, "I've already thought about it. I'll use concepts like the meditation club or the oxygen bar. Although it sounds like it's all over the place, as long as there's a living example like Xie Junping, those elites and rich second-generation heirs who've had enough fun will still flock to him." The so-called second young master of the Xie clan was indeed Xie Junping. Luonan was certain in his heart. He walked to the edge of the platform. It looked like he was admiring the night scenery, but his mental senses enveloped the entire platform. The man who had been silent for a long time finally spoke. He did not seem to be very enthusiastic about it. Director Wu, This Director Wu was probably a director of some company. When he talked about business he could not stop talking. He interrupted him and said, "I can tell that you don't have any concept. Did you know that this was the way of the Castlevania Financial Group? Have you heard of the Castle Financial Group? No. Then you should have heard of the brand Shenda, right? Sportswear? That's right. There are also a few others." Director Wu casually mentioned 3 or 4 brands with world or regional fame. These are all intangible assets of the Castle Financial Group. Just these alone have a market value of over 10 billion. And I just heard some news recently. Standing behind this financial group is a order. What do you think? I don't have any thoughts. I don't understand what you mean. I want you to pay attention to the interesting chemical reaction that will occur when an order and capital are added. I also know Mrs. Halder of the Castle Financial Group. She's a skilled trader, but I believe that I'm not inferior to her. But 10 days ago, the assets under her banner were over 5 times mine. Director Wu spent a few minutes describing the relationship between the Castle Financial Group and the Blood Flame Order. From what Luonan knew of the inside story, there were many elements of hearsay in Director Wu's words. There were even a few laughable mistakes. But the general sequence of events was made clear. Luonan discovered once again that he had overestimated the thickness of the barrier between the secular world and the inner world. The conflict between the 2 factions of the Blood Flame Order had already caused an impact in the secular world. The repercussions had yet to fade. Director Wu learned some knowledge from this. I'm a bit late in understanding that business can be done this way. Actually, the order and capital, the mystic arts and money, have been a perfect match since ancient times. Fortunately, it's not too late. You just said that they didn't have a good ending. That's only relative. In fact, they've already settled down in T-City. The projects they've invested in still receive the full support of the T-City government. They're still the capital protected by the laws of the Earth Coalition government. What's this? This is world-class influence. Director Wu's tongue was like a lotus flower. He tried to convince the man in front of him in one fell swoop. We can completely follow this path. You preach, I make money, we support each other? I don't understand all this. I just want to ask. Director Wu, aren't you going to do a few treatments? I think it's very appropriate to follow the order's method of moderation and getting used to it. Director Wu's expression changed slightly. He laughed again. That's it. I think it can convince a lot of people. Think about it a bit more. This conversation fully illustrated the maxim of not getting along with each other. A conversation that could create billions of wealth ended hastily. Director Wu maintained a polite smile. In reality, he left with resentment. In order to avoid the elevator that was destined to be awkward, the other person waited for a moment. Then he cast his gaze over and swept his gaze over. After all, there were only these 2 groups of people on the entire platform. Qin Ikuan observed carefully and seriously. Who knew that Luonan would raise his hand in the open? Is it Dean Wan? Luonan listened from beginning to end. He was already convinced that this ability user, who didn't seem to have any inhuman characteristics, was the welfare Dean Wan Ta that he had missed. Luonan recognized Wan Ta, but Wan Ta didn't recognize Luonan. He had a bit of suspicion on his face. You are, Luonan? Luo as in Luo Lai, Nan as in Nan Nan. Wan Ta's eyebrows moved slightly. He had probably heard of this name before. He said it out loud. You're the one that Junping and Little Yong talked about? Yeah. Their awakening ceremony went smoothly, right? Luonan laughed as he walked forward. It will probably take a month or two for them to truly comprehend and cross the threshold. Many thanks for your help in guiding them. Their path is very proper, and you didn't spoil things through excessive enthusiasm. Wanta laughed very peacefully. He chatted about these extraordinary abilities like he was chatting about his daily life. Luonan also chatted very naturally. He started chatting casually. Actually, we just went to pay a visit to your home. It's the orphanage in the Forest Wall district. Did Junping and Little Yong have any problems with their training? No. I went with worker Zhai and Di Weiwu. Wanta was a bit surprised. Worker Zhai? Di Donghua? Chapter 439. It seemed that Wanta had a good impression of worker Zhai. Di Donghua is a person with a sense of order. He does things in a clear and organized manner. He is very suitable to get along with Weiwu. I hope Weiwu can learn a bit more. His talent of chaos gives me a headache. Talent of chaos? Luonan thought of a few things and couldn't help but laugh. He really is a troublemaker. Qin couldn't help but glance at Luonan when he heard this. Wasn't this guy publicly recognized as a troublemaker? He had made a name for himself for 2 months and already had enemies all over the world. Weiwu has lived in the wilderness since he was a child. The rules he learns are completely different from those in the city. He is also a very arrogant child. It will take him a long time to adapt. I really hope that Mr. Zhai can adopt him, but unfortunately, the Social Security Department refused on the grounds that Mr. Zhai is still single. It was a bit subtle to talk about adoption with a member of the secret order. But Luonan felt that it was quite good, whether it was the topic or the person in front of him. So he complimented, Weiwu can learn quite a bit by following Dean Wan. But Wanta's expression turned serious. He shook his head in denial. Weiwu is a natural-born adventurer. He constantly pursues novelty and excitement in order to obtain happiness. Mr. Zhai's power of order is just right for him. It is like a brake pad allowing him to brush past danger. But for me it is like a cage. It will only stifle his characteristics. Wanta paused a bit when he spoke to this point. He looked at Luonan. Mr. Luo, you are another cage. You are powerful but complicated. You are also very contradictory. You have a talent that allows you to return order and order to a corner of the chaotic world. But at the same time you make the surrounding world more chaotic. Finally, Wanta finally revealed a bit of a swindler, but he didn't hate it. This was because his words were surprisingly sincere and straightforward. Most importantly, what he said was in line with reality. Luonan had always been good at this kind of relatively empty topic. He asked, Dean Wan pursues order? Yes. Returning order and order to the chaotic world has always been my pursuit of a sense of accomplishment. Oh, I'm sorry. These words might be a bit hypocritical. Wanta carefully organized his thoughts and said, I should say that the existence of order enters my eyes and heart. It conforms to my aesthetics and calms my mind. And I think that most people in the world think the same way as me. Yes, human cognition is a process of returning chaos to order. Using cognition to guide our actions, making the surrounding environment more orderly. Almost everyone does this, but the ability users can do it better. But it could be worse, Vanta added. And? Luonan came to a realization under Wanta's meaningful gaze 2 seconds later. Are you talking about me? I don't mean to offend you, but in my opinion, Mr. Luo, the way you affect the surrounding environment is very likely to be too direct and violent. At least according to my senses. This was the second time Wanta had said this, and it was more direct than the last time. Qin, who was at the side, wanted to stay far away. If he continued to listen, his head would probably explode. However, when he heard Wanta's words, he did not dare to move. He was worried that if these two did not get along, they might end up fighting. Luonan only displayed a bit of curiosity. Rough? Do you think so, President Wan? I think so. We should have something in common on this matter. For example, we all use various methods to form our own order. But next, I use the law of creation to affect external objects. Starting from the plants and trees around me, I create the most suitable pattern according to their respective material natures. Look, this is my ritual for sensing material natures. Wanta directly formed a seal with his hands and adjusted his breathing. He gradually raised the seal from his lower abdomen to the space between his eyebrows. This ritual is something I modified by referring to the model of traditional religions. What I seek is the state of harmony between my body and the material form of the outside world. He really was preaching at the drop of a hat. However, Luonan greatly appreciated this frankness and directness. He also felt that the scene before his eyes was somewhat familiar. His mind spun twice and he finally thought of something. Wasn't this child? Back when he was at Frost River Reality on Fudong Great Street, the ears of truth had frankly and magnanimously exchanged knowledge with him. Speaking of which, they were all creatures that lived completely within their own logic. Wanta's description was quite precise, but Luonan knew that there was a more convenient method to communicate with such people. With this thought clear, Luonan cast his consciousness into the depths of the void. On the mental plane, he deliberately operated the gravitational effect of the closed system, causing the heavily chained crow to reveal itself and head straight for the abyssal region. Last time, he and Child had used the form of confrontation on the mental plane to complete the relevant communication. Now he made the same invitation to Wanta. Luonan felt that Wanta would use a similar method to respond. However, Wanta's method was a bit novel. He raised his hand to his forehead and pressed it down again, ending at his lower abdomen. But during this process, a layer of seemingly soothing undulation was conducted in a specific direction. Originally, it only flowed in the material world, but for some unknown reason, it suddenly crossed the boundary between material and mental. It climbed layer by layer, heading straight for Luonan's plane. From Chinikuan's point of view, the various scenes on the viewing platform during this period of time were simply like an absurd play directed by a crazy artist. Luonan and Wanta maintained their silence most of the time. They just looked at each other. Luonan could roughly guess that they were communicating through the mental plane. There were very few times when the two would even open their mouths. However, the syllables that came out of Dinwan's mouth did not belong to any language that Chinikuan was familiar with. They were more like some sort of religious incantation. As he spat out the syllables, he continued to form seals and wander. His movements were strange and complex. Then Luonan did the same. It was just that when he spat out the syllables, he used his hand to draw some sort of diagram. It was a vague representation of formatting theory. If they weren't ability users, if they weren't mentally enhanced, Chinikuan would be certain that they were all lunatics. Even now it was more or less the same. This bizarre exchange continued for approximately 20 minutes. Chinikuan watched until his scalp went numb. There were several times when he wanted to report the relevant situation, but he forcefully suppressed it. This continued until one moment when Luonan's brows suddenly furrowed. His movements paused as if he was troubled by something. Wanta undid his hand seals and returned to their normal form of communication. It's getting late. I need to go back. The public security over there isn't too good at night. Luonan went, oh, but he didn't urge him to stay. He just said, many thanks for your guidance. I will definitely pay you a visit later. Wanta simply replied with a word of welcome and nodded towards Chinikuan. He turned around and walked towards the elevator. Luonan watched him leave. He waited for the elevator door to open and close before going down. Only then did he turn his gaze towards the sparse starry night sky. Though he had something on his mind, he still sighed in satisfaction. Let's go back. Okay. Chapter 440. Luonan did not pay attention to Chinikuan's expression. He rode the elevator up, his mind still recalling what he had learned from the previous exchange. He had benefited greatly from the exchange with Wanta. That person's understanding of order, especially the difference in the two's methods of achieving order, was described to perfection. It was displayed without restraint. Just as Wanta had said, Luonan's method of achieving order was to change his own body, including the existences of the plants and trees around him. He formed a materialized space. There was nothing else besides these. Therefore, even though he was communicating on the mental plane, he was using material waves to influence the mental plane. He was not using soul strength. This was even more material than fleshly body strengthening. This was the fundamental reason why his order called it creation. As for the so-called creator, that was an overinterpretation. But from Luonan's perspective, Wanta's law of creation was more like a mirror. It reflected his own understanding and practice of order. The current effect of Luonan's formatting theory was a kind of restraint on the mental willpower. It gradually moved from the mental plane to the material plane. In a certain sense, this kind of restraint was the most thorough. But because of the extreme complexity of the mental plane, there were times when one would pay attention to the beginning and forget about the end. In comparison, the specific rituals and methods of communication between them were just minor details. Mr. Luo? Oh, we're here. Luonan came back to his senses. He saw that the elevator door was already open. He patted his head, said good night to Chinikuan and returned to his room. He hastily washed his face and lay down on the bed. He closed his eyes and let his thoughts enter a more pressing track. He did not forget that the reason he had interrupted the exchange was because there were more important things he needed to do. Luonan's consciousness followed the internal connection of the sealed system. It passed through the greatly warped mental curtain and cut into the depths of the mental plane. Suddenly, a rolling mist spread out before his eyes. It was like the boiling of the ocean, roaring and turbulent. TSK, I knew that this method wasn't reliable. After confirming the current situation, Luonan calmed down a bit. He went into an out-of-body state in his bedroom, hooked up the external neuron, and shot out through a crack in the window into the night sky. Luonan's soul body arrived 10 kilometers away in the wetland jungle of Acumen College in the blink of an eye. He locked onto the building of gear and flew down. Another 10 seconds passed, and Luonan entered the cloud world. The scene from the Wraith Sign's perspective just now was happening in front of him in an even more frenzied manner. Amidst the suddenly amplified noise, a huge amount of clouds and ice crystals swept past like an uncontrollable tsunami, displaying the worst side of the cloud world. Luonan floated in the air, his soul cloak fluttering and swirling. He continued to interfere with the surrounding material world. This could be considered a brief warm-up. Luonan had already locked onto his target at this time. It was within the turbulent clouds 20 kilometers away. A mushed-mouth ape flew as fast as lightning, but it also showed rare signs of panic and pain. It let out an ear-piercing screech as it flew at high speed. Its body kept twisting as it tried to shake off the bindings on its body. As for the binding, it was the Wraith Sign. It's only been a few days and you've already created such a scene for me. Luonan was complaining, but he was actually quite excited in his heart. Ever since he discovered and entered the cloud world, he had always been tossing and turning, searching in the thick clouds, playing hide-and-seek with those mushed-mouth apes, but this world was really too big and too strange. He didn't find any traces left behind by his parents. He also didn't find Snake Tongue's shadow. There was no way for Luonan to be satisfied with this sort of progress. Things finally changed for the better when the Wraith Sign entered. Even though this was the result of the fellow not doing proper work. The mushed-mouth ape that lived in the cloud world was an extremely terrifying predator, and the Wraith Sign was one as well. The Wraith Sign was able to coexist peacefully with the mushed-mouth apes for the past 10 days under Luonan's constraints. But as Luonan's energy was constantly diverted by other matters, this fellow finally began to run wild. 4 days ago, the Wraith Sign used its powerful hunting instincts to silently lock onto this mushed-mouth ape. It used the polar domain to use an inconceivable method of infiltration to unwittingly lock onto the lifeline of this mushed-mouth ape. Then it exerted its strength today. The Wraith Sign's originally incorporeal body had already become indistinct and visible due to it being infinitely close to the material plane. Most of its body sunk into the back of the mushed-mouth ape. It greedily extracted the energy and blood of the mushed-mouth ape, transforming it into the nutrients it needed. Without a doubt, this marathon hunt had reached its end. The Wraith Sign bit into the throat of its prey and began to reap the harvest. But like all nature documentaries, this primitive and wild hunting operation had a very high probability of failure. Since the mushed-mouth ape's energy and blood was extremely vigorous, the transformation required a certain amount of time. The Wraith Sign seemed to be in control of everything right now, but it was actually at its weakest. It was infinitely close to the material plane, which meant that normal methods could strike it. The Wraith Sign was alive and well right now because it had effective control over the prey beneath it. But this control was unable to affect the other mushed-mouth apes. Right now, the prey beneath it shrieked in pain and the turbulence brought about by its high-speed flight. The other mushed-mouth apes had already received the relevant information. Even though they didn't have any kinship with each other, a few nearby mushed-mouth apes gathered over out of curiosity. The mushed-mouth apes' attack methods could cover the material plane and the mental plane at the same time. It could even blast all the way to the abyssal region on the mental plane. Once these mushed-mouth apes discovered the target and lent a helping hand, the Wraith Sign would become a living target. Luonan needed to do something. Even though what he could do was very limited. The scarcity of options made it easier for him to make a judgment. He pondered for a few seconds and his floating soul body suddenly sped up. The strength of his soul cloak slapping against the mist and ice crystals increased to the highest level. Rustling sounds rang out, and the interference force on the material plane was completely unleashed. At the same time, he expanded the range of his mental senses to the limit. One by one, he locked onto the mushed-mouth apes that surged over from all directions. It didn't matter what direction or distance they came from. As long as they were within the range of his senses, Luonan sent out a mental attack. The radius of Luonan's senses was roughly 25 kilometers. But when faced with a terrifying hunter like the mushed-mouth ape, the fragrance emitted by the soul body had to be at least 5 times the distance. The mushed-mouth ape was an existence that was essentially driven by instinct. They were practically unrestrained by social organizations. Between companions and food, what would they choose? Of course it would be food. Chapter 441. Hurry up and get it done. Luonan didn't know how to instruct the Wraith sign on how to devour a B+ rank mushed-mouth ape. He could only issue this vague command: turn around and run. He ran as far as he could. The speed of a soul body flying at full speed was quite impressive, but the mushed-mouth apes weren't inferior. Their attacks were like erupting lava. They could easily reach several kilometers with a single move. The degree of deceleration was so small that it made people want to cry. This situation was completely different from how Luonan dealt with Tianbang and the others. Back then Luonan was playing a game of hide and seek. He wandered about on the mental plane, completely occupying the home field advantage. He came and went as he pleased. And right now, though he was flying in the clouds, it was like he was playing a hopscotch game in the magma of the Earth's crust. The attacks from the mushed-mouth apes were far too berserk. They interfered with the material and mental planes at the same time, causing the area he was in to distort and mutate. It was like a boundless lava hell. After the attacks overlapped many times, even the incorporeal mental curtain burned one after another. It turned into a deathly stillness and blankness. This was the first time Luonan had seen the mental curtain being burned and destroyed. Of course, it would slowly recover after a dozen or so seconds. The so-called burning should be a kind of extremely distorted illusion. From Luonan's perspective, every time this situation occurred, it was the same as cutting off most of his escape routes. He needed to increase the distance and he needed to dodge attacks from time to time. He couldn't truly escape into the polar domain and throw these fellows off. He was truly at a loss. He was in an extremely sorry state. It was only because his soul strength reserves exceeded his imagination that he was able to withstand the pressure. He pulled 4, no, 1 more. He kited 5 mushed-mouth apes, running further and further away. It had to be said that Luonan's aggro was quite substantial. The cloud world was vast and boundless, and the density of mushed-mouth apes was extremely small. These 5 mushed-mouth apes were all the stock the Wraith sign had attracted over the past 5 days. Luonan was certainly in an extremely sorry state, but the Wraith sign had become calm and tranquil. Its devouring and absorption speed had greatly increased. Soon, right? Soon? Luonan was forced to his limits after being besieged and attacked by several mushed-mouth apes. He no longer had the energy to divert his attention to the side. He was simply unable to grasp the situation far away. He didn't have any thoughts of sacrificing himself for others. He had already set a bottom line before he made his move. As long as he felt he exceeded his limits, he would escape into the polar domain regardless of whether the Wraith sign succeeded or not. He decided to quickly rendezvous with the Wraith sign. His mind naturally expanded, and the mental plane interweaved with the living starry sky to determine a new direction. The living starry sky changed endlessly according to the surrounding environment. Only his core star domain and the believers that revolved around it always existed. They formed the basic structure of the closed system of formatting theory. Why was there an extra piece all of a sudden? Within the living starry sky, a bewildering yet real nebula appeared within Luonan's system. It revolved around the periphery of his core star domain. There was no doubt that it had already entered the range of society formatting that Luonan could control. However, due to the influence of its own chaotic order frame, its structure was still somewhat fuzzy. That's right. The Wraith sign should have already controlled the mushed-mouth ape. Then from a system perspective, Luonan suddenly came to his senses. His telepathic thoughts seeped out, and several hundred kilometers away, the dispirited and listless mushed-mouth ape suddenly opened its fierce eyes. It was a bit confused, but it was extremely quiet. It was quiet like a wooden puppet. Was this for real? Luonan's soul body was infected with the habits of his fleshly body once more. He gasped in response, and then he issued an order from a distance. Turn around. The mushed-mouth ape hesitated slightly, but a tenth of a second passed before its enormous body, which was over 6 meters tall, turned around. Raise your left leg. There was still a moment of hesitation. Then this vicious creature really did a golden rooster standing on one leg, and it maintained this posture. Punch. Jump. Fly. The mushed-mouth ape's reactions varied in speed, but in the end, it would carry out Luonan's orders without any discount. Luonan gradually came to understand. The mushed-mouth ape's hesitation was actually an interpretation of his telepathic thoughts. It was an adaptation process. After a dozen or so orders, the mushed-mouth ape's hesitation was practically non-existent. Oh really? How should he put it? Luonan's soul body made a gesture of spreading his hands. Actually, it was very difficult for him to hold back his laughter. A tyrannical vicious beast comparable to a B+ rank was under his command just like that? The results obtained from the Wraith Sign's willful actions were simply inconceivable. Chapter 442. After brushing shoulders with death several dozen times, he had finally accumulated enough luck to exchange for the embrace of the goddess of luck? Luonan sprinted the entire way, quickly traversing several hundred kilometers. He arrived at the area where the mushed-mouth ape captive was located. The bewildering nebula corresponding to the mushed-mouth ape had already stabilized its orbit. It was extremely deep. If one were to convert it into the stratification of the social format, then it would enter the third level, the technician level. It would stand side by side with the Wraith sign. The technician level? How could a captive do that? The definition of the stratification of the social format was that there were priests and politicians, and there was no need to care about the students. The most essential difference between a technician and an employee was that an employee could only display their abilities to serve Luonan, while a technician could increase Luonan's own abilities by a considerable amount. In terms of strength, the Wraith sign and Baze were currently in a direct confrontation. Baze would most likely obtain victory without Luonan's interference. However, the Wraith sign was able to firmly occupy the technician level. The fundamental reason was that Luonan's soul strength could operate more efficiently through a special Darksider life form like the Wraith sign. His My Heart's a Prison ability formed a perfect match with the Wraith sign, and the Wraith sign was the largest supplier of his soul strength reserves. Looking at it this way, the mushed-mouth ape certainly had something special that could be used to enter the technician level. As for what it was, he would know after using it in the future. But how would he use it? He couldn't bring such a big guy over and take him away. If he really had to fight an enemy, was he supposed to pull the enemy into the cloud world? Oh, so you're saying? Luonan's heart thumped. His train of thought suddenly deviated to a new direction. He was a bit unable to restrain himself as soon as this thought arose. Come. Don't think too much. You'll know once you try. Luonan didn't say anything further. His thoughts moved, and a subtle change occurred in the structure of the external neuron that was one with his mind. It opened up a channel to the normal world. Big monkey, can you go through? The mushed-mouth ape sensed Luonan's thoughts. Its strong and sturdy body flew directly toward the incorporeal channel. This situation was similar to when he drove the human-faced arachnid into the cloud world. It was just that the direction was reversed. Luonan observed from behind. He saw the mushed-mouth ape's figure slightly warp in front of the incorporeal channel. He was filled with anticipation, but then he suddenly remembered. The channel in the normal world led to the space of the tree hole. The mushed-mouth ape was over 3 meters tall, and his shoulders were wide and round. Once he went over, that narrow space would immediately explode. The mushed-mouth ape had already taken half a step into the incorporeal passageway. Luonan didn't have the time to think too much. His soul body arrived before the mushed-mouth ape. The familiar narrow environment was indeed the space of the tree hole. It was very difficult to stop the space tunnel on both sides. Otherwise there was no telling what would happen. Shift. At the same time, Luonan used telescope mode to observe the changes in the structure of the space of the tree hole as much as possible after the return passage opened. At this moment, even Luonan himself didn't know what he was doing. He just felt a scorching aura overflow from the void. The space in the tree hole was clearly shaking, creaking. Perhaps it would collapse in the next moment. Luonan's soul cloak fluttered in the wind. He shielded this attack with all his might, protecting this place. However, at this moment, the soul strength that belonged to him was being consumed at a terrifying rate. This was the first time ever since Luonan possessed this excessive amount of soul strength. This was the first time such an astonishing leak had occurred. It was as if a large hole had been dug into the seabed, and an enormous amount of reserves poured down in torrents. The hole was located at the location of the external neuron. The external neuron was the key to opening the world tunnel. The condensation ring structure was the external neuron, but a special structure would naturally form in the hollow region of the ring when the world tunnel was opened. The scale was far too small, exceeding the limits of Luonan's senses. He never knew the specific circumstances. Perhaps it was due to the effect of Luonan's intense willpower, but the external neuron, which was connected to his mind, used a special method to warp the key structure in the hollow region. The key structure trembled and changed within a certain range. Every time it trembled, a large amount of soul strength was burned and consumed. However, there were even more marvelous fluctuations that covered the mental and material planes. The distortion spread to the normal scale of the external environment. The enlarged distorted structure vaguely corresponded with the space of the tree hole observed through the telescope. Another opening. Luonan didn't have the time to think too much. His soul body leaped out of the tree hole and directly smashed into the swamp lake outside the withered tree sandbar. A second later, the calm surface of the water rippled and boiling bubbles rushed up. If someone was underwater at this time, they would probably piss their pants. Behind Luonan was a malevolent demon. Only its face and a small portion of its shoulders were exposed. Its body was covered in a layer of magma-like flames. Water vapor rose from it as it struggled and roared. It seemed as if it could charge out at any time, but it also seemed as if it could be cut in two by the ruptured door at any time. The water near Luonan's soul body actually had over 1,000 mental curtains that were intensely warped. They were linked to the material plane, and the external neuron was the core. The key structure was projected onto the normal scale, forming an incorporeal and unstable door. In this way, the space tunnel could temporarily exist independently from the space of the tree hole. However, after abandoning the fixed exit, the benefit of nearly zero consumption came to an end. The area where the mental and material planes converged had an enormous degree of warping, and the energy consumed was astonishing. As the sole energy provider of the external neuron, Luonan's accumulated soul strength had already fallen by 2/3 in a short second. This was an instantaneous drop that had never happened before. The rate of decline was very frightening, but if he could realize his expectations and deliver a B+ rank vicious beast to him, it would be worth it. However, reality was always more bony than ideals. This won't do. I won't be able to deliver it. Luonan sensed both sides at the same time. He knew that the cloud world and the normal world were connected by a crack that could transport objects. But the volume and weight of the object were not important. What was truly troublesome was the influence it had on the framework of the world order. To move the rotten tail ape over, the gravitational force on the other side would become extremely astonishing. It was like 1,000 incorporeal ropes and chains binding it. Luonan had already squandered away the little bit of flexibility it had left. He could forcefully continue, but from this point on, every time a small part of its body was pulled out, the consumption would increase exponentially. Looking at the enormous body of the rotten tail ape, which was over 6 meters tall, Luonan's most robust accumulation of soul strength was only able to satisfy 1/10 of the requirements. Right, this was the result of not including the consumption of opening the unfixed passage. In other words, even if Luonan could shrink the rotten tail ape by 10 times and perfectly fit it into the space of the tree hole, it would still be impossible to come over. The only good news right now was that the external neuron's energy consumption optimization was done very well. As long as this degree was maintained, the consumption of maintaining the space tunnel across the world was barely acceptable. He could bring this half of the vicious beast's body to come and go as he pleased. What the hell? Luonan originally believed that it could appear as a super profound meaning, but now it looked like it was just a remnant move? Demon summoning remnant? Roar of the rotten mouth ape? Luonan looked straight at the sinister and ugly face. He lost the courage to even imagine the thought of relying on this thing to deal with powerful people like Tian Bang. The chase and treatment in the cloud world had seriously consumed Luonan's free time. He wanted to continue researching the problem of the mushed-mouth ape with all his might, but for the sake of preventing Xuanhuan and the others, who were in charge of security work, from sensing that something was amiss, he could only restrain his mind and retract his giant ape arms. On the other side of the cloud world, the mushed-mouth ape who had been reduced to a test subject wasn't cut in two. It had only fallen into the fog formed by the cross-border passage and was so distorted that it could not be seen. Only when Luonan sent the ape arm back did this enormous vicious beast materialize from incorporeal, returning to the cloudy world. From now on you will be Yuan Yi. Luonan casually gave the mushed-mouth ape captive a name, and he temporarily set aside Cloud Peak. His soul body leaped out of the surface of the lake, and he rushed back to Ocean Sky Cloud City. He strove to cut into his normal routine. When the soul returned to the hotel, it was already 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was time for morning classes. Luonan was destined to not need to sleep. This kind of lifestyle wasn't very healthy, but he had to get used to it. Luonan hid in his bed and adjusted his breathing for a bit. Then he began his morning classes. He began with Daoing. His movements were slow and relaxed, but he constantly touched the limits of what his fleshly body could bear. A thin layer of sweat formed on his body after a quarter of an hour, and he gradually entered an optimal state. Luonan entered a very rare state of relaxation. His body was tough and relaxed and he went with the flow. It was as if he could easily complete any difficult movement. This method of combining Daoyin and yoga was the most suitable for restoring his physical strength and energy. The initial results were pretty good. Luonan seemed to be half asleep and half awake. He was already half in a meditative state. But he didn't know when it started, but his mind suddenly stirred restlessly. The scenes that happened in the cloud world, especially the scene of him being chased by the 5 mush-mouth apes, continuously leaped back and forth in his mind. Only through this method did Luonan truly understand what sort of state it was to be surrounded by perils. He was already very nervous when he personally experienced it, but when he truly recalled it, he discovered that the dangers that could consign him to eternal damnation were far greater than what he had perceived back then. It was hard for Luonan's mind to calm down at this point. He also knew that this sort of situation was most likely due to the effects of fire poison on his soul body. His injuries had yet to heal. His current situation wasn't too good. It must be known that the mind was in a mess, and the mind was in a mess, and the mind was in a mess. The circulation of the blood energy in his entire body would be affected, forming a vicious cycle that would injure his foundation. The most important thing is still to compose my mind. Jim Master Shio once said that it's hard to be calm in the midst of stillness. I should seek to be in motion. I still have a place to start. Luonan's mind changed and he no longer forcefully restrained himself. A strand of thoughts of divinity naturally followed one of the most profound trajectories in recent times. It revolved and transformed. In the blink of an eye, a transparent bead of water condensed in front of his forehead out of thin air. Luonan's method of achieving stillness within motion was the dripping sword. The amount of effort Luonan put into the dripping sword over the past 10 days or so wasn't any less than what he put into the cloud world. After all, this was the most effective method for him to consume soul strength. Of course, just now, the demon summoning that forcefully dragged the mushed-mouthed ape into the real world had successfully replaced the dripping sword's pouring milk mode in terms of consumption and speed of consumption. In the future, he probably wouldn't have to worry about the diseases of wealth, such as the imbalance of his body and soul. And on the other hand, the value of the dripping sword was far from being able to be encompassed by the term pouring milk. It was an extremely mature and perfect method. Whether it was to face an enemy or to cultivate, it could give rise to countless transformations. It was extremely malleable. Moreover, it involved the structural changes of the neurons in the outside world, their functions, and the interference effects of the soul body. It looked simple at first glance, but it was boundlessly profound when examined in detail. Luonan wouldn't slack off in his practice of the dripping sword no matter what. Luonan discovered as soon as he got his hands on the demon summoning, that the process of creating and controlling the dripping sword was like turning a large flame to a small flame when cooking. Some minute changes in the control of the flame were contained within. As the water droplets appeared one after another before his eyes, the condensation ring structure that had condensed out of thin air was like a mirror. It reflected the various minute flaws that flowed through his mind. The injuries caused by the combined attack of the mushed-mouth ape had some areas that weren't recovered properly. But after the condensation ring and a few auxiliary structures were molded and combined, several hidden injuries that had nearly been missed were discovered. They were slowly drained and recuperated. Luonan continued to improve. Luonan thought of the words that Jim Master Shio had once said, "One is civil, one is martial. Tension and relaxation have their own paths." That was probably it. Luonan gazed at the dozen or so water droplets arranged in a row, and he suddenly slapped his forehead. He activated the recording function of the hexaear to record the entire process of cultivation. He did this because he needed to be completely focused when forming the dripping sword. Sometimes he clearly knew that a flaw had appeared, but it was hard to keep track of it. With the recording he could review the process in time. It was beneficial for him to adjust his progress. Complete concentration, repeated practice, video review and guidance from a famous teacher. Luonan practically possessed all of these requirements needed for precise practice. Naturally, his progress was godly. Luonan tested it out and the recording function was turned on. Only now did he truly begin to practice. His training method was like an assembly line. First, he concentrated his energy on creating the core structure, the condensation ring. He created the maximum number of condensation rings within a preset amount of time, ranging from 100 to several hundred. Then he began to add auxiliary structures to each condensation ring to form the complete dripping sword. Finally, he counted the number of complete dripping swords that remained. The requirements for this process were quite high. The exquisiteness of the condensation ring determined whether or not it could persist to the end. The various auxiliary structures, including the coordination between them, all had a direct effect on the lifespan of the dripping sword. Luonan was already familiar with the process, but due to the influence of his soul body's injuries, as well as the fact that he had to convert between civil and martial fire, there were many flaws in the beginning. 15 minutes passed, and only 122 complete dripping swords remained. Tisk, I've regressed. The recording this time had practically no value at all. Though Luonan was dissatisfied, he didn't delete the relevant recording. After all, in a combat environment he might not always be full of spirit and energy, and his condition would be at its peak. 122 dripping swords would be 122. He could consider going a bit higher for today's match. 122 dripping swords flew out from a crack in the window under Luonan's mental control in the next moment. They soared straight up, quickly breaking through the city's traffic layer. They continued to climb until they entered the chaotic airflow of the upper troposphere. His sensing radius exceeded 20 kilometers, allowing his dripping swords to continue climbing, all the way until they entered the stratosphere. But that sort of environment would lose the meaning of training. Therefore, these 100 or so dripping swords stopped in the troposphere. They were like a school of fish swimming against the waves, spiraling and swimming. They needed to resist the low temperatures and violent airflow of high altitude. At this time, there happened to be two young women who got up early for their morning jog. When they saw this scene, they exclaimed in surprise. One of them wore smart contact lenses. She blinked and captured this scene. But Luonan and xianxia had already run far away without looking back when they tried to strike up a conversation. A legendary master. Is he from our school? What a pity one is too big and the other is too small. Whatever, I'll just post it on the school's website. The two girls chattered away, but Luonan and xianxia could hear them clearly. The latter praised softly, exhaling chi like an arrow, gathering and not scattering. Mr. Luo, your internal cultivation technique is progressing at a godly speed. Well said, Headmaster Xiao. This is also the result of interference force. Luonan was already used to the constant interference effect of his soul strength on the material world. This was not only the case when his soul was in an out-of-body state, but it was also the case when his body and soul were present. This could help him familiarize himself with the subtleties of the material plane and harmonize his body and mind. Otherwise, even if he held a dagger or a gun, he wouldn't be able to make Shuelei breathe during the battle. This kind of training method was something Luonan realized himself. No one had taught him. However, Luonan found a bit of theoretical support after his exchange with Wanta last night. According to Wanta's law of creation, the order differed from person to person. People needed to have a keen perception of the internal and external environment. They needed a kind of long-term contemplation of the internal and external harmonization of the body and mind. From this point of view, Luonan's path was correct. He couldn't help but sigh. Sure enough, cultivation still needed to communicate with people. He could see the road ahead clearly. After running another 2 or 3 kilometers, xianxia was a bit baffled. Mr. Luo, is your school this lively every day? Luonan followed xianxia's line of sight. His gaze pierced through the evergreen plants to the side of the green oxygen track and cast towards the nearby plaza. He saw people surging over there, signs waving in the air. There were at least 300 to 400 people gathered there. And there was an endless stream of people pouring in. The two were both ability users with sharp eyes and ears. They could see from afar that the signs over there had words like truth, transparency, and so on. Maybe the school did something stupid again? Luonan wasn't interested in this sort of thing at all. He continued to run forward. But there was another stream of people a few hundred meters away. It was a group of roughly 20-year-old young men and women. They whistled excitedly and waved signs as they passed through the long hallway. Hey, it seems like the scene is getting bigger and bigger. Luonan was curious as well. He lowered his head to look at his wristband and entered the school's network. He hadn't even opened the page when several notifications popped up. Luonan let out an ah when he saw the relevant content. He reached out his hand and smacked his forehead. Mr. Luo? Damn it. Prematurely aged. What? Today is Saturday. It's the weekend. I don't need to go to school. Yeah. Oh, this is a common occurrence. xianxia came to a realization. So Luonan had gotten the date mixed up. Their security team thought that Luonan had other plans. They didn't ask anything and just stayed with him in the hotel for the night. After all, he was a young man. Forget it. I'll just go with the flow. I'll go take a look at gear. The school cafeteria should be open today. Breakfast is on me. Brother Qin and the others, give me some face. Xuanhuan laughed as he shook his head. I'll thank you on their behalf. However, it's better for everyone not to gather together in a public setting. Perhaps it will cause trouble for future assignments. I can help them get their meals. Okay. I'll choose a few special breakfast dishes. Luonan had completed today's training load. He led Xuanhuan to the cafeteria. Xuanhuan's gaze swept across the clusters of gathered students. Speaking of which, is there going to be a demonstration in the school right now? Yeah. But it's not just Acumen College. It's the entire city's colleges and universities. They're going to set a record for a city-wide student demonstration. Luonan opened his electronic calendar and confirmed the time. November 17th, the 150th birthday of World University. Those seniors might want to organize some commemorative events. As for the theme of the demonstration, according to the notifications, it was mainly to express dissatisfaction with the transparency of government governance. Earthquakes, terrorist attacks, and many other recent public events. People urgently needed to know the truth, to put an end to the days of rumors flying everywhere. Xuanhuan laughed after hearing Luonan's introduction. He was a bit disapproving. From his perspective, it was better to feign ignorance of these cruel truths. For example, if a certain person was in a bad mood, he could use infrasonic waves to wipe out the entire city. Did these students really want to know? Could they accept it? Luonan felt Xuanhuan's gaze. He wasn't too clear on the specifics of Xuanhuan's thoughts, but he could feel some sort of emotion. So he shrugged his shoulders and pointed in a different direction. How about we speed up a run in the school's cafeteria number 1? After a short breakfast time, the security personnel's work methods changed. Xuanhuan no longer followed Luonan closely. Instead, he went into the darkness with his companions. Luonan was constantly being watched by several pairs of eyes. He couldn't tell the difference between protection and surveillance. Luonan needed to adapt to such a situation because this was the result of his own actions. Perhaps only when he didn't need to rely on external objects like the flying devil ray could he intimidate the majority of his enemies and protect the safety of himself and his family. Or perhaps he could be eliminated by others early on. Only then could he be free. Right now, Luonan could only feign ignorance. He didn't take the streetcar after eating. He walked step by step towards the depths of the campus. It took him around 20 minutes to reach the auditorium at the edge of the jungle. Any further and he would be in the wetlands jungle. The spacious space in front of the auditorium was the same as the other plazas. It was occupied by the senior students of various faculties. Some people even brought tents and utensils. It was like having a picnic. There was a high probability that they would bring this sort of equipment to the municipal plaza as long as they could set it up. A call came in at this time. It was Xie Junping. Hey Nanster. You met with Dean Wan yesterday? Luonan raised his eyebrows. You hired a new private detective? I'm sorry. I can't use my limited resources on you. I just came out from the orphanage. Dean Wan's evaluation of you is quite high. The orphanage? Went to do morning classes? Yeah. Memorizing books and chanting scriptures. My mind will be clear for the entire day after I'm done. Super awesome. How long was it? 45 minutes? Luonan looked at his watch. It was only 7:30 in the morning right now. This meant that this bro had to get up at least 6 and hurry over to the orphanage to listen to classes. In a certain sense, this could be considered a rebirth, right? Dean Wan was certainly a master craftsman-level teacher. To be able to correct a half-degenerate wastrel like Xie Junping to this step, the prodigal son's secret technique, the return of the prodigal son, should be nearly at the max level. Xie Junping asked him, "Where are you right now?" "I'm watching my seniors have a picnic in the auditorium plaza." "You're at school? You're also participating in today's parade?" "Sorry. I'm not that old. I'm not that bored either." "Humph. I really should have suggested letting some juniors who lack a sense of social responsibility come in and watch." "Okay, I'm rushing over. Everyone in the school student union has their vacation cancelled. Let's meet before the parade? I need something." "What's up?" "I can't explain it clearly over the phone." "Then come. I'm crossing the river. See you at Gear in a bit." "Alright. The interior renovation project will be suspended for next week." "Ha. I shouldn't have gone to the orphanage last night. I feel that it's not as pretty as that place. I need to think about it a bit more." "Yeah. I also feel that Dean Wan's design is super awesome. Actually, he's worried about raising funds every day." If you're willing to outsource the design and renovation, he might even bring the entire orphanage over to work. Luo Nan laughed involuntarily. Okay. I'll think about it. Chapter 445. Luo Nan stood at the edge of the swamp lake in front of Gear. His nose twitched slightly. Aside from the fishy smell of water flowing through the air, there was also an indescribable smell. It was very faint, yet it lingered in the air without dispersing. The nose orifice was connected to the lungs. Luo Nan had already begun to practice the corresponding internal cultivation technique. His foundation was deep due to his year-round breathing exercises. His progress was extremely fast. Currently, his cultivation of the 5 zangs, 6 roots, and 9 apertures had reached the primary level. His liver, heart, spleen, lungs, eyes, tongue, mouth, and nose had all reached the primary level. Only the ear aperture and kidney chi still needed to be polished. Now he stood by the lake, his nostrils quivering and his mouth slightly open. His inner chi naturally nourished the corresponding organ structure of the human body, making the corresponding receptors more sensitive. The small chemical molecules floating in the air stimulated the relevant areas through the corresponding channels, activating the corresponding feelings and memories. His sense of smell and taste intertwined to form the basis of his judgment. It even formed a set of blurry images that reflected the relevant information. Perhaps Luo Nan suspected that this was a predetermined answer, but Luo Nan was still able to confirm that the source of this wave of relatively stimulating small molecules was the mushed-mouth ape tossing and turning at the bottom of the lake in the wee hours of the morning. It's hard to avoid getting caught in the mud. The deeper one cultivated, the more sensitive they would be to the changes in the external environment. The more detailed the information they collected, the closer their perception and judgment would be to the truth. Most of the time, it was beyond the comprehension of ordinary people. It was as if he had the eyes of a ghost that could see through the truth. Therefore Luo Nan returned to Gear. He wanted to see if there were too many traces left behind from Midnight's violent summoning. If there were, he would clean up the loose ends to prevent attracting flies. As it turned out, he was right to come. Luo Nan's soul strength was like an incorporeal cloud that pervaded the void. He used his interference power to disperse the aura traces around the swamp lake as much as possible. Then he entered the passageway at the bottom of the lake and wiped away some of the burnt mud. At that time the temperature at the bottom of the lake was indeed very high. Even if the mushed-mouth ape had crossed the boundary between the two worlds, its destructive power was still quite shocking. This was very good. However, it wouldn't be fun if they were discovered early on. Fortunately, Luo Nan had to clean up Gear and its surroundings every few days, sweeping away all the monitoring devices. Otherwise it would be even more troublesome. Xie Junping had yet to arrive by the time Luo Nan walked out of the passageway at the bottom of the lake. Xie Junping sat in the corner of the bar outside the passageway, waiting. He didn't stay idle either. With a thought, the 10 raindrop swords circling the top of the troposphere flew over one after another. They passed through the door as if they had a mind of their own. By the time they reached Luo Nan, the water droplets were full, sparkling and translucent. Of course, these water droplets were formed later on. Under the harsh environmental test at the top of the troposphere, it was difficult for the external water droplets to exist for a long time. They could only be driven by the strong structural framework to ensure an endless stream of water droplets. Perhaps this was the true killing move of the water drop sword. Luo Nan pondered over the concrete scenario of facing the enemy. Unfortunately, he was unable to find an opportunity to experiment, so he stopped thinking about it. To him, there were other uses for these 10 water drop swords that he had spent so much effort to condense and test them. Come on, it's time for nutrition. The electric light between his eyebrows flickered, and the external neuron in the form of a dripping sword emerged from his skull. The electric fire that lingered around it suddenly forked and struck the other 10 dripping swords. The water droplets instantly evaporated, but the structural framework was still there. It even formed a subtle connection with the external neuron. The external neuron trembled, miraculously projecting its current structure onto the other 10 dripping swords. Similarly, the other 10 dripping swords also mapped their respective structural details onto the external neuron. Just as he had experienced before, the higher his cultivation, the more different his perception became. When one progressed to a certain degree, it would already exceed the scope of common sense. It would even subvert one's worldview. Luo Nan's cultivation progress was extremely fast. It was not excessive for Qin Yikuan to praise him with words like godly speed. At the same time, his perception of the world was endlessly deepening. His current perspective and viewpoint were somewhat different from what they were a week ago. The difference was even more obvious after 10 days to half a month. This kind of change was perfectly embodied on the dripping sword. It was embodied on the structural circuit constructed by the external neuron. Luonan's attainments in the dripping sword could be said to be at a high starting point and a high level. He had just entered the door, but he had already surpassed the efforts of the vast majority of people. The condensation ring mold he had constructed for the external neuron earlier was a divine item that he had miraculously obtained in his peak state. It broke through the boundary between the mental and material planes in one fell swoop. Let's wait until you've truly entered the door. Luonan was really worried that Xie Junping would become a chatterbox. He took the initiative to change the topic. What do you need from me? Xie Junping was a bit hesitant. I'm afraid that you won't like to hear it. Luonan raised his head to look. He more or less understood what was going on when he saw Xie Junping's expression. It's related to this place? Xie Junping sighed. He sat on an empty chair in front of the bar. The ownership of gear will be decided soon. We'll enter the final bidding phase tomorrow. An announcement might be made on Monday. Do you want to go take a look? There's no need to participate in things that I can't decide on. Ho, your tone is getting bigger and bigger. You really don't want to go? Luonan laughed as he shook his head. Xie Junping sighed once more. He moved his elbows back and rested them on the bar counter. He raised his head in an exhausted manner. There's been such a huge change in the middle, but both sides are actually able to hold on until the end. Right now, the Construction Society is still quite confident. On the other hand, the Divine Research Society's previous financial backer has withdrawn his investment and merged with the Construction Society. This has dealt quite a blow to them. The newly invested LRCF is lukewarm. There's no sign of an increase in the stakes. They haven't even given up yet. I've looked for Tang Yi quite a few times, but I haven't gotten any clear words. So, with his current friendship with Lady Du, it would be great if he was still the president. LCRF. Life Fund. The corner of Luonan's lips curled up. Greedy capitalistic old wolves. Those in power are vainly trying to grasp power at straws. Xie Junping gave him a blank look. At the very least, my old man throws money in from time to time. He has a bit of authority. Now it was Luonan's turn to dissuade him. The Construction Society is up to no good. The LRCF isn't a good thing either. Since it's not a good thing for us to have anyone take over, why bother with this? These words make one's heart go cold. So it turns out that we've worked for nothing? Xie Junping laughed and turned his head. Speaking of which, what are you planning on doing in the end? Me? Luonan raised his hand to point at his nose. Conserve energy and prepare for war. Don't joke around. I'm being serious. Luonan's posture didn't change. He laughed involuntarily. Am I not being serious? It's true that I can't choose who will take over. But I will certainly properly communicate with those who take over what they want to do. It doesn't matter which method I use. Luonan's gaze pierced through the bottom of the lake and cast into the distance. It was in the direction of the large living area. Ocean Sky Cloud City was directly facing this place. Xie Junping followed Luonan's gaze and looked forward. All he saw was the turbid and dark bottom of the lake. He blinked his eyes. He didn't understand what was going on. Though I don't understand what you're talking about, it doesn't feel too good. Things won't get complicated, right? I hope so. After all, I don't want to complicate matters. There are far too many vexing matters. Luonan sighed. His fingertips moved to the space between his eyebrows. The external neuron mapped the relevant software interface, revealing his notepad. There were a bunch of unfinished matters on it. Big ones. Small ones. Things that could be spoken of. Things that couldn't be spoken of. Things that could be resolved. Things that couldn't be resolved. There were so many things that needed to be broken through. Luonan wasn't in the mood to continue chatting when he saw these recorded matters. He stood up and waved his hand at Xie Junping. You go organize the parade. I'm leaving. Don't. The main character will only appear at the most crucial moment. The various teams might not even be able to make it to the city center in the morning with today's scene. The most important moment is in the afternoon. Of course, the best time is still at night. I still want to take a nap here. Chapter 446. This was not the first time Xie Junping had spoken of the miracles of gear. Luonan did not find it strange. After all, Xie Junping belonged to his formatting theory system. It was not a big deal for Luonan to agree with gear. Moreover, the formatting theory system was in a constantly expanding state. The range of influence and interference grew wider and wider, and the levels grew richer and richer. The corresponding feedback grew more and more abundant. Luonan, as the master, had eaten his fill. How could he not allow others to drink some soup? Under these circumstances, Xie Junping had unwittingly mutated his root receptacle. He possessed a foundation that exceeded that of ordinary people. Wan Ta's awakening ceremony was tantamount to capturing Xie Junping's root receptacle, leading him into the door and activating his potential. Surpassing Du Yong on this foundation was a normal phenomenon. As for how things would develop in the future and what they would develop into, Luonan needed to analyze the root and make a clear direction before he could make a judgment. Luonan drew a profile of Xie Junping in accordance with the artifact mechanism discrimination technique taught to him by the gym master. Xie Junping's life sketches correspondingly appeared in Luonan's system. Xie Junping's life sketches became clearer and more penetrating. However, Luonan also thought that Xie Junping was a member of the formatting theory system. As for Wan Ta's law of creation, it was also a system. Luonan needed to pay attention to whether or not there would be problems with two systems at the same time. He had a pensive look. I need to have a chat with Dean Wan later. Xie Junping did not know how many thoughts went through Luonan's mind in the time it took for him to turn his face. He mistakenly believed that Luonan was the same as him and wanted to ask for guidance from Wan Ta. He rushed to recommend Luonan. Let Dean Wan teach you how to coordinate. He teaches different techniques to everyone in the morning class every day. He pays attention to them at the same time and gives pointers at the same time. He is precise and appropriate. Not a single one is missing. His ability to multitask is truly amazing. This was the second time Luonan heard someone recommend Wan Ta's coordinate technique. The last time was from Di Weiwu. One could imagine how deep of an impression this skill left on people. He was not pretentious. He nodded and said, I will learn it if I have the chance. Xie Junping chuckled and reached out to grab Luonan's shoulder. This isn't a skill that can be grasped just by learning. Dean once said that from the beginning one needs to go through 6 stages: temperance, habit, ritual, precision, efficiency, and coordinate. Each stage requires a large amount of practice. It takes a long time to form habits and instincts. It takes at least 3 to 5 years. So you were talking nonsense just now? Of course not, I just think that ability users like you would be more likely to accept it than us. Also, before you learn it, don't you need my help? Xie Junping grinned cheekily. He put one arm around Happy's shoulder and used the other to pat his chest. Look here, Xie Junping from Heaven Crystal Creatures. Thank you, young Master Xie. No, Nanster, please call me Director Xie. Xie Junping's nose was about to touch the sky. Right now, I'm already the CMO of Sky Crystal Biology's research and development subsidiary. The company's current market value is 5 billion. From a standard perspective, I've officially entered the cultivation sequence of Sky Crystal Biology. CMO, Chief Marketing Officer? Yes. The Chief Marketing Officer of a drug R&D company is a pharmaceutical sales representative? Xie Junping pushed him away. Enough. Other than those people in the company, I'm the first one to tell you. Is this how a brother should express himself? You've got to be shocked a bit. Luonan clicked his tongue twice. Okay. You can hold it in until now. You can hold it in. I have to thank Dean Wan. Actually, I was about to explode when I heard the news last night. But today I did my morning classes and read the scriptures. It seems like I'm fine again. Luonan quietly watched him act pretentiously until this fellow couldn't help but grin. Hurry up if you want to congratulate me. A company with a market value of 5 billion couldn't be considered top-notch in the eyes of a rich second generation like Xie Junping. But the information behind it was indeed worth celebrating. I remember you saying that your family's old man would rather hire a professional manager and set up a charity fund to raise money than let you take over. How many years? Cough. How many days ago was that? That's why there's an old saying. A scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at in a new light. Look, the living example is right here. So you blinded your family's old man's eyes? Xie Junping choked and couldn't speak. He extended his hand and pointed, but soon he laughed. That's right. The old man was testing to see if his eyes were blind or not. Luonan understood. It was clear that Xie Junping's recent performance of being reborn had reignited the flames of hope in his old man. Xie Junping took out a company with a market value of 5 billion for his own son to practice with. There was no need to say anything. This was his own father. Luonan sincerely wished. The old man isn't young anymore. I hope that his eyes will always be clear for the rest of his life. I thank your entire family. Xie Junping was already disinclined to get angry. Actually, he really did want to thank Luonan. Ever since he became a partner with Luonan, it seemed that some marvelous things would always happen. The people he saw, the things he experienced, made him ponder over a few questions he had never thought about before. Unknowingly, he had already changed his usual trajectory. Thinking about it, if it wasn't for the mysterious feeling he had when he was at Gear, Luonan wouldn't have been able to abandon his rich nightlife, doing things like meditation, chanting, researching magical arrays, and so on, no matter how unfathomable Dean Wan's soul awakening technique was. If it wasn't for this change, his old man wouldn't have given him this sort of nurturing test for him to inherit the family business. Perhaps he would have been like those drunken seniors of his. He would have relied on the so-called foundation to muddle through his days, until he tossed his last breath around in drugs, fine wine and women. Perhaps Xie Junping felt that this was pretty good in the past, but now he was faced with Luonan Shuelei, and all sorts of other miraculous characters and events. His past days seemed too low. It should be better to take a few more steps forward while his own passion had yet to fade. Xie Junping suddenly laughed in spite of himself. He embraced Luonan's shoulder once more. Do you know what the biggest change is after I became CMO? Please advise me, Chief Xie. In the past, I spent my old man's money. There were many times when I couldn't find a reason to spend it, and the amount was very awkward. But now, I'm spending the company's money. All I need to do is say, I can earn it back, and it's fine. This is the privilege of a pharmaceutical representative. Your family's old man will cry, right? I feel like I'm holding on to a project that's guaranteed to be profitable. Of course, convincing a bunch of stubborn old fools will take a bit of time. Are you sure? I'm sure, and I'm sure. After all, the only person I really want to convince is my old man. I understand him all too well. Ever since I was young, he always told me this. People always need a little motivation. After all, our vision is only so far. Xie Junping straightened his arm and raised his thumb, squinting his eyes as he took aim. Start with small things that are easy to solve. Get rid of them first and get a sense of accomplishment. It's the same as stepping on the gas pedal. Then you'll enter the fast lane. Under the effect of inertia, you'll keep doing it until the next motivation arrives. So I don't need to promote a lot of new drugs. I don't need to double the company's profits either. I just need to perform a bit better than my previous terrible performance, and the second motivation will beckon me. Oh, I think I used this method when I was learning from Dean Wan. Hey, are you listening? Luonan was dazed for a bit. He nodded and said, make your family's old man happy, and I'll give you a $5 billion company as motivation. Is that right? More or less. Then I wish you an early improvement. Luonan looked at his watch, waved his hand and walked out. Hey, let's talk about the $5 thing. Xie Junping finally had a channel to vent his excitement. He grabbed onto Luonan, not wanting to let go. It's not like you're going to have a parade. Where are you going on the weekend? I got pointers from your family's old man. I'll go out and put it into practice. Ha! I'll find the easiest problem to deal with. I'll get some motivation or something. Chatting really did help open up one's mind. Luonan unwittingly sorted out a bit of a thread from a pile of vexed matters. Right now he was faced with a pile of vexed matters that could be roughly divided into 3 types. The first type was the type that had the heart but lacked the strength. For example, he had to clear his grandfather's name and make formatting theory a prominent school of thought. He would practically have to make the entire world his enemy. It was absolutely impossible to accomplish in a short amount of time. This included Quantum Corporation, the Ability User Headquarters, the Order of Justice, and other new and old grudges. These were the main bodies that gave him enormous pressure. The second type was the type that worked for a long time. For example, cultivating, studying, supplementing his general knowledge, and so on. It was hard to see results in a short period of time, but he had to spend time on them every day. He could not slack off in the slightest. The third type was the type that could be resolved. Most of them were temporary missions as well as small troubles that he encountered on a daily basis. These 3 types of matters were tightly interwoven together. They gave him pressure, took up his time, and distracted his mind. In the end, they destroyed his state of mind, causing him to be constantly affected by negative emotions. He was constantly fretful and restless. Right now Luonan was already clear that he was unable to completely eliminate the pressure. It was also impossible for him to lower the quality of his cultivation. This problem would inevitably exist for a long time. But looking at it from another angle, what he could do under these circumstances was actually simpler. Cut the tangled hemp with a sharp blade. He could use the fastest speed to resolve all the miscellaneous matters. He could sever the messy branches that were distracting his mind and let his energy return to the main path. He could also receive incentives in passing. Luonan pulled out a thread with great difficulty. He wouldn't waste any more time. He bid farewell to Xie Junping and walked out of gear. He took a look at the credit balance in his personal account. In terms of wealth, a 7-digit number was quite pleasing to the mind and body. He needed to make some extra money faster. Trigate Securities' business wasn't too difficult, and it had the highest quality-price ratio. Once it was completed, there would be a large amount of income. Perhaps he could even give the Devil Ray a down payment. It could be said that this was related to combat strength. It was necessary to speed up the progress. Working overtime on the weekends. That's it. Luonan used the Hexeer to open a high-precision city map and loaded the team search data onto it. He could see that the search range had expanded to the core city area in half a month. There were results, but there were also negative results. According to the latest intelligence, there was a high probability that the degree of invasion of the mutants had risen from the first stage of external infiltration to the second stage of primary infection. On a level that they were unaware of, there was even the possibility of a third stage of a new type of mutant. Luonan was quite baffled. Things had already reached this point. The Xia city government was still sealing off the news. It was quite shameless. Chapter 447. Luonan never expected that things would actually develop to this step when he first accepted the mission of preserving the genes and ecology of the native species. Though Luonan hadn't put much thought into this matter over the past half-month, he had still borrowed his knowledge to participate in a few meetings. He knew very well that he couldn't complete the mission alone. Therefore, for the first time in more than 10 days, he took the initiative to contact his nominal partner, Peony of the Hidden Indigo firm. Luonan walked through Ink's channel. This crow believer had been following by Peony's side recently. Using Ink as a medium was undoubtedly the most convenient. But when Luonan's telepathic thoughts shifted to absorb Ink's perceptual information, what appeared before his eyes was a world of darkness. Luonan spent a few seconds to get a general understanding of his surroundings. This was an alley between tall buildings. The fire escape ladder attached to the building and the automatic conveyor belt connected the building made the already narrow area even more unbearably crowded. This kind of dark and cramped area usually belonged to the recycling layer. In the shadow of the alley, a certain someone was leaning against the wall on the inside of the corner of the fire escape. The narrow corner could not accommodate her long legs, so she had one leg propped up and the other extended out of the staircase, half of her leg dangling in the air. In this way, Luonan could naturally see that the person was actually wearing a pair of cotton slippers. They looked fat and clumsy. It was a stark contrast to his handsome leather jacket and skinny jeans. Oh, the snake-patterned pointy high heels that were thrown askew to the side. Although the color was flirtatious and full of nightclub style, she should be able to hold it up. This sister was now shaking the bottle of wine with a mysterious smile on her lips. She looked like she had a hangover. Needless to say, she definitely looked good. But the problem was this nightclub girl who seemed to have just had a crazy night of fun and couldn't find her home. Was she really that free and easy yet strong and shrewd Peony? If it weren't for the obvious difference in height and facial features, Luonan would have believed that he was looking at Cat Eyes, who was drowning her sorrows in alcohol. Under Luonan's command, Ink's claws hooked onto the railing of the staircase on the other side of the building. It observed from above. Perhaps she was looking too directly, but Peony suddenly raised her head and met the crow's pitch-black eyes. She raised the wine bottle and gestured. Have a good weekend. Against Ink or against Pat Block? It was most likely the latter. And so Luonan knew that it was very likely that he had underestimated Peony's level of keenness. Or perhaps Peony had been feigning ignorance all along, only revealing clues when she was hungover. Luonan certainly had to put 120% effort into dealing with this kind of woman with deep and sharp schemes. He didn't want to leave any clues for her to use against him, so he communicated with Peony through the rubber band on Ink's ankle. Moreover, he asked a question he already knew the answer to. Good morning. Did you just search this area? I didn't. The door was blocked, so I snuck out. Hee, why do you look like you've been caught red-handed? Luonan did his best to make his tone sound like that of an adult. He learned from Cragburst and joked a bit too much. Peony responded calmly, probably. But are you finally free this weekend and ready to officially join the crew and take a makeup break? Hey, don't ignore my contribution. Forget it. Luonan knew that Peony was looking down on his behavior of not putting in any effort during this time. Frankly speaking, he really hadn't put in any effort ever since he reported the whereabouts of the wing-hand bloodbat. He had received over $1 million in remuneration so far. At least half of it was a bit of a hot potato. Peony didn't bicker with him about this. She just shook the bottle again. I can't keep you company today. I have something to do. Do you know? The World University's birthday is a holiday that belongs to us. Luonan was actually speechless. That's right. When he first met Peony, she came out of Acumen College. It seemed that she was a graduate student of some professor. She could be counted among the ranks of university students. Speaking up to this point, Luonan actually wanted to investigate Peony's background more than once. The problem was that he had to take Her Majesty Empress Wu's face into consideration. He could only act muddle-headed for now. You want to participate in the parade too? Speaking of which, Crow, you pay a lot of attention to the lives of students. I'm just surprised that you're not doing proper work. Mr. Crow. Alright, you can't add a suffix, right? Then, Mr. Partner, humans haven't evolved to the point where they work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week without sleep or rest. Humans are very weak. They get tired. We find time to rest. We find fun for ourselves. It is because of this that it is interesting and wonderful. So, don't obliterate the final value of human society. Luonan was speechless once more. He looked at her appearance. Could it be that, you've fallen out of love, right? Don't read too much into it, Mr. Partner. I'm enjoying my current state. Unfortunately, I can only get drunk for a while. Peony faced Crow from afar. She shook the wine bottle once more and then she drained it in one gulp. The wine bottle smashed against the wall with a crash and then it fell down the stairs. In the end, it was smashed into smithereens. Peony stood up against the wall. She lowered her head and curled her lips in disgust. So ugly. She was referring to the cotton slippers on her feet. They were blue-checkered men's slippers. They were old and Luonan had a few pairs at home. The old and mediocre outer appearance really didn't match well with Peony's slender and well-proportioned feet. Speaking of which, could it be that this person became a mistress and was blocked at the door by the main wife? Did she run away in a panic? Elite women played this game these days. Well, it seemed to be common in television dramas. In reality, this was probably true love. It was a pity for those spare tires and men who admired goddesses. Luonan didn't make any moral judgments. In any case, he wasn't the one taking over. However, his feelings toward Peony had changed a bit. The element of looking up to and admiring her had lessened a bit, and he felt a bit more realistic. They were all ordinary people. Right now, he was a bit worried about Peony's state. It wasn't safe for a great beauty to stay on the recycling stratum when she was hungover, even in broad daylight. As for Peony's personal strength, he still had no idea. Hey, where are you going? Peony didn't answer. She turned her head and looked around. Finally, she saw her high heels lying crookedly to the side. She chuckled and casually kicked off the cotton slippers on her feet. She fitted her feet with the most suitable decorations. The bewitching patterns and shapes instantly drew out lines that were pleasing to the eye. Peony seemed to instantly regain her usual aura after putting on the shoes that belonged to her. She laughed again and waved her hand at Crow above her. Then she staggered her steps and walked out of the alley. She's definitely right. She's pretending to be calm. Luonan pondered over Peony's state of mind as he urged Crow to follow her. The alley went all the way up, slowly going from the recycling stratum to a normal street block. Perhaps the statistics of the public security department were far too accurate, or perhaps Peony had the talent to act in melodramatic dramas. It wasn't unexpected that such a great beauty would bewitch the eyes of some people. In the shadows of the building, a tall and coarse young man brushed shoulders with Peony. When he looked at her from the front, his eyes nearly popped out. He turned his head to look at her back and was stunned for a few seconds. In the end, his heart was clouded by lust. He turned around and chased after her, chuckling as he struck up a conversation. Beautiful, where are you going? Peony didn't pay any attention to him, but the young man's skin was thick enough. He followed closely and didn't let go. Look at you. You didn't drink to your heart's content last night, right? I know a good place. Let's continue another round. Peony continued to move forward, but an inexplicable smile seeped out from the corner of her lips. The young man saw the side of the beauty's face suddenly come alive because of her smile, and he became more and more enchanted. This time there were even more people who responded. The sound waves had already converged into form. Honor. Faint beads of sweat appeared on Peony's forehead. She simply tore off her leather jacket and draped it over her arm. Her upper body was just a thin shirt, and it was completely unable to conceal her beautiful lines. However, what truly stirred people's hearts was her wanton and bright smile. Her snow-white teeth were revealed beneath her beautiful lips. They were so splendid. She walked into the marching group with large strides amidst this sort of smile. She was like the most familiar of friends. She opened her arms as if it was a matter of course, and she placed them on the shoulders of two students. The students just so happened to be a man and a woman. Both of them were stupefied. But at this moment, the screams and applause of the others shook the windows of the surrounding tall buildings to the point of droning. Peony faced the sky and howled amidst this wave of sound. Youth. The hearts of the marching group and the surrounding spectators had already been stirred by this dazzling beauty. Most of the people were already at a loss for words. They just screamed in response. Then everyone saw the arm that pointed to the sky. Victory. Chapter 448. This crazy woman. Luonan never imagined that a beautiful woman with the style of an elite like Peony would play so wildly after getting drunk. The most important thing was that she had super powerful rallying power. Even the citizens on both sides of the street were stirred up by the scene before their eyes. Quite a few people applauded, whistled, or gave thumbs up to the parade. The atmosphere and emotions of each side interweaved and collided, pushing the entire street to a state of climax. Luonan didn't know what to do in this situation. Muddle-headedly following in the air for half a block, Peony's interest actually increased rather than decreased. She was truly in high spirits from playing. In the end, Luonan felt that he really couldn't keep up with her anymore. He called out in secret, "Hey, are you planning on marching all the way to the municipal plaza?" Upon hearing this, Peony raised her head. Disregarding her current situation of being the center of attention, she extended her hand and pointed straight at the ink in the air. Amidst another wave of cheers, she laughed loudly. "Bet your college life on it. Do it." Damn, this woman is really crazy. Though he said this, Luonan was actually quite envious. First, it was Peony's innate talent as a natural leader. Her affinity, rallying power, and inciting power were all off the charts. With just a few vague words, she was able to make thousands of students and citizens dance with her baton. Secondly, it was probably that wanton and unrestrained attitude. This woman clearly hid deep, gloomy emotions in her heart, but the moment she walked into the crowd, it was as if all the obstacles had been swept away. Looking at her smile, it was as if there was bright sunshine shining directly in. Should he call her scheming or strong-willed? In any case, this was completely different from using alcohol to vent one's emotions. Cat eyes should seriously learn. Though Luonan was the least qualified to say these words. Luonan's main body had just walked out of Acumen College while he was paying attention to his partners going on strike. But where should he go next? He stood at the school gate, hesitating. Peony was the one in charge of communicating with Trigate security. Without this link, Luonan would be unable to receive support from that side. Was he really going to wander around the city alone and cast his net a few times? Luonan's wristband suddenly vibrated. There was a call coming in and there was even a video request. Luonan swept a glance and rushed to connect. "Aunt?" On the virtual screen, Luo Shuqing's face was serious but pale. She did not look well. "Where did you sleep last night? Not in Blue Bay?" No, I'm at Ocean Sky Cloud City." Luonan answered cautiously. "What for?" "It's mainly because it's more convenient for me to go to school today, so I stayed with a few friends nearby. I forgot that it's Saturday. I'm at the school gate now." Luonan felt that there was nothing to hide. He even raised his hand to shine a circle in all directions to show his sincerity. He let his aunt see the surrounding environment. Even with his attitude, Luo Shuqing's expression was still serious. She seemed to be asking and confirming, was it Moya who was in Blue Bay last night? She seems to be there quite often recently. Luonan absolutely wouldn't take the initiative to admit that he had contacted Moya last night, so he spoke vaguely. But even so, his aunt did not let him off easily. Her tone was unusually stern. "You clearly know that Moya has been staying out with those scoundrels and hasn't returned, yet you still make things convenient for her. Do you think she's not having enough fun?" "How could I?" Luonan cried out, feeling wronged. "My sister wants the access rights. I can't just not give it to her. Recently, I had been living in the Nade district, so how could I have the time to care about Blue Bay? I haven't cleaned it for a long time." That depends on the situation. That's your house. It's passed down from your ancestors. My heart hurts when I think about how it's been messed with by those fellows who don't know what's good for them. Take back your access rights. What was going on? It must be said that his aunt had been extremely dissatisfied with Emoya staying out at night recently, but she didn't have any intentions of squeezing her daughter's living space outside. She couldn't bear it today? Luo Nan scratched his head a bit when he saw his aunt's unsightly expression. But he knew that he absolutely couldn't go against the Grand Secretary's will right now. He hurriedly said, "Don't be angry. Taking it back is just a matter of operation. I'll do it right away." "Wait for me to leave." "Huh? You're in Blue Bay right now?" Luo Nan finally discovered that the background of the video was a bit familiar. He wiped his cold sweat. He never thought that his aunt would actually get up early in the morning and kill her way to Blue Bay community to block the door. Clearly, his aunt had lost all patience with Emoya's lifestyle. Even if she carried the title of a feudal parent, she still wanted to forcefully intervene. "Seriously, is my sister still alive?" She ran off with her guitar. "There's no one over there." "Then I'll send you the passkey. You can deal with it as you see fit." "No need. Why would I need the passkey for a house under your name? Aunt and I can't differentiate between inside and outside." Luo Shuqing clearly knew that Luo Nan was deliberately trying to be obedient, but this scene was far too rare. Even though Luo Shuqing was in a terrible mood, she still couldn't help slowing down her tone. "There's no need to curry favor and act cute here. I don't buy it. Emoya's way of doing things is very excessive. You, her accomplice, won't be able to escape. Of course there's also Emopeng. I remember every single good deed you three have done. Let's go back and talk about them one by one. Please calm your anger. There's nothing to say. As long as you can make my sister fully realize her mistakes, I'll be willing to accept a few beatings." Luo Nan could sell out his sister in minutes without any pressure. And this sort of jesting and joking method was much better than being a yes-man. Luo Shuqing finally hooked her lips. "You've become quite glib lately. Do you have a girlfriend?" Luo Nan blurted out, "How is that possible?" He had learned quite a few dirty jokes from Papercut and Cragburst. Cat Eyes was also someone who dared to say anything. Mixing around with that lawless ability user would cause some changes in his speech habits. And this seemed to be the most effective way, right? Luo Shuqing really did divert his attention. "I heard Mo Ping say that you have quite a good luck with women at Acumen College. He's just jealous that I'm being taken care of by my senior." "Okay, I know. No matter how charming the children of the Luo family are, there's no problem with their hearts. However, you need to learn some skills in getting along with people. Don't be so straightforward. You'll hurt yourself and others. That's not good." "Yes, you're right. It's not a problem for you to have a few more friends. But don't learn from your sister. Don't fall head first into those circles." I won't. Luo Nan laughed dryly. He said a few more words and finally hung up the phone. He didn't stop after that. He immediately found Emoya's number and dialed it. However, there was no response from the other side. Did I just lose contact? What kind of trouble did I get myself into? Luo Nan called twice but he didn't get a response. He couldn't help but scratch his head. His aunt's emotions were controlled quite well when she was talking to him. But if she wasn't truly furious, she wouldn't have vented her anger on him. Luo Nan was a bit regretful right now. He should have made a trip to Blue Bay last night when he passed through the River Wu district to understand the situation. He paced a few steps in front of the school gate, his hand pressed to his ear. He considered finding a skilled expert like Bamboo Pole to lock onto Emoya's position. Was this making a mountain out of a molehill? His wristband vibrated just as he hesitated. He subconsciously connected the call and Emoya's voice came through. Chapter 449. You're looking for me? Luo Nan let out a sigh of relief when he heard Emoya's voice. Then his anger flared up. You're the one who's looking for me, to take the blame. What are you talking about? Emoya's background was noisy. The sound of a piano and drums joined together. It seemed like someone was calling her. She responded with two sounds before turning around to talk to Luo Nan. I'm rehearsing right now. I'll contact you in a bit. Luo Nan looked up at the sky and sighed. Emoya, you sure have a big heart. The high priest has exploded and you still have the heart to rehearse. Are you going to hold a concert for 10,000 people? 100,000 people level. Screw your 100,000. You're dreaming. Yeah, I'm dreaming. I'm hanging up. Emoya, why don't you try calling my name again? So what? Amoya, you tricked me. Tisk, little brother, you're such a good boy. Come over to the municipal plaza at noon. I'll treat you to a meal and introduce you to some beauties. Luonan was a bit stupefied by Amoya's unpredictable attitude. But he soon recalled that this was Amoya's usual trick. He laughed and was about to retort when Amoya said, "Oh right. Don't come too early. Our practice venue is rented until 2 o'clock. We'll be racing against time." "There's really a show? What do you think? I'll contact you at noon. I'm hanging up." Then the call was cut off. Luonan stood at the school gate inside after a while. Today's plan was doomed to fail. He spoke to Xianxia and rode a security vehicle to the municipal plaza. It was a bit early to go over, but his previous plan had been destroyed. He didn't know what to do for a time. Luonan's consciousness shifted to Ink's location in the car and locked onto Peony. If Peony were to follow the procession, they would most likely reach the municipal plaza. For safety's sake, he needed to maintain a distance from her. But what in the world was this sister doing? She was stirring up a storm in the procession just a moment ago, but she immediately left the procession after receiving a phone call. Luonan ran to a relatively sparse location with a few flashes of light. Ink followed him out of habit. Peony displayed her extraordinary keenness once more. "You're here again? How did she know that I just left for a while?" Luonan was a bit stupefied. He replied, "What are you going back and forth for?" Peony stood in the shadow of a tall building, far away from the clamor of the crowd. She smiled as she looked at the surging stream of people. Fulfilling everyone's wishes. For them, this level of achievement was enough. In any case, most of them didn't want to do anything. Even if some of them were like this, they didn't have enough awareness to pay the price. It's not even as good as your attitude towards work. Even? That wasn't a good word at all. Peony put on her leather jacket again and laughed happily. "Including me, I'm not as good as you, alright? That's why it's good to participate. It's more valuable to work with you. Thank you for thinking highly of me, but now it's my turn. When you said you have something to do, are you referring to watching the parade with me? Go to the municipal square on the way." "Municipal square? Where are you going?" "You're right. That place will be a good place soon. The city government will cry if they hear this. As long as it's meaningful to us. This is indeed a good opportunity." Luonan was suddenly unable to keep up with Peony's train of thought. "Opportunity? What opportunity?" Peony pulled her hair back into a ponytail. She bit a rubber band in her mouth and cast a sidelong glance at Ink. "It looks like I overestimated you, Mr. Partner." Luonan didn't care about Peony's evaluation. He knew early on that this Miss Peony could toss him in the dust in terms of planning and scheming. She was just stating the facts. His attitude was upright and very calm. "You don't need to evaluate my thinking ability. You just need to provide the conditions for me to reveal my search and sensing ability. I believe that this is the meaning of us being partners." "Oh, that makes sense." Peony really did seriously consider this for a moment. Then she nodded. "That's what the firm told me in the beginning. How could I forget? I'm sorry. Maybe I drank too much last night. Of course, it's more likely that you haven't fulfilled your duties during this time, giving me some sort of misconception." "Maybe." Peony tidied up her ponytail and stepped on the high heels on her feet. "I need to change this too. But let me first explain the so-called opportunity. Since we're going to the municipal square, as long as it's not a particularly exhausting matter, we can completely handle the related search work. After all, this is an opportunity to collect sufficient samples." "Samples?" "That's right. 3 samples. It's just like what's described in the records of the operation. After this period of incubation, the probability of a third-stage mutant infection appearing has already reached a statistically significant significance. Speak in human terms. In other words, due to the invasion of this batch of mutants, the ecosphere of Xia City has already received serious contamination. Affected by this, it's very likely that a primitive mutant has already appeared by our side. Its original form might be a rat, a wild dog, a crow, or even a person. But in the end, it will become a monster with an intense desire for destruction and an instinct for reproduction. And then? The municipal government is still sealing off the information. Then a biohazard crisis type of blockbuster will play out in Xia City. When that time comes, we definitely won't be able to get the follow-up payment. The firm's reputation will pretty much be wiped clean. I'll lose my job and my partner will probably have to change employers. Of course, this is the worst-case scenario. Hee, this demonstration is truly righteous. It's also our opportunity. Peony pointed at the gradually departing procession. Look, a procession like this can be seen on over half the streets of the city. There are a total of 954,000 or so registered university students in the Xia City region. They come from over 70 institutions of higher learning. 4 major districts are spread throughout the north, south, east, and west of the city. The number of people participating in the demonstration is over 100,000. And if we include those fellows who join in the fun, the police and civil servants who are responsible for maintaining order, the merchants who seize business opportunities and service personnel, etc., the number of people involved will certainly exceed 200,000. Oh right, there's still a performance tonight. Singers, famous actors, popular boy and girl groups, virtual idols, and so on. By the peak hour of the evening, the number of people gathered within a 5-kilometer radius of the municipal plaza will be between 300 and 500,000 people. Do you believe it or not? Luonan didn't respond. He couldn't help but think about what a canned sardine crowd of 500,000 people would look like. At that time, the residents of every corner of Xia City will appear in the plaza. A sampling rate calculated from the total population of 90 million people in the main city district of Xia City is quite reasonable, whether it's from a sociological or biological perspective. Luonan had a general idea, but he still needed to confirm it. What do you mean? You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.